On behalf of the Division of Academics, I'm Justin Robichaud, the math supervisor in EBR, and today we're going to provide an overview of what teachers and administrators can do with data received from end of module assessments through Illuminate. On the bottom of this slide, you will see the bit.ly to gain access to this presentation, which is bit.ly/data TDW. So the math focus for this upcoming school year is to work on implementing consistent reasoning and problem solving skills. One of the tools we hope to help us achieve this focus will be the continued implementation of our district-wide assessments for all modules in kindergarten through geometry. So let's take a deep dive into those assessments that are all found within Illuminate's platform. So again, all tests are designed, end of module test, to be taken during a 45-minute period. Now this obviously excludes students with accommodations who may have extended time. All standards are addressed on the assessments from each module. Kindergarten through second graders can use Illuminate in the digital platform, or they can also use the PDF print form of the assessment, while we're asking all third and above students to take the test entirely digitally through Illuminate. So the big thing about these end of module assessments is that they are consistent. One reason that we wanted to create these assessments is to make sure that our teachers were having improved best practices and great conversations around their students. So every test will have the same exact makeup, no matter which grade level or which module is taking. All tests are 12 questions in length. Every test has a multi-select, a constructed response, multiple choice examples, fluency standard questions, and if the student is in third or above, there will be a tech enhanced question. So as we stated before, all of these assessments are through Illuminate. So now you have the data. So what? So the first thing is we want to make sure we're working under the understanding that data is extremely important. The purpose of giving the assessment is to gain information around how our students are performing. So it allows us to see the growth of the students. It allows us to see which standards have not been mastered and which have been. It also provides information on where we need to reteach and reassess. So once students have taken that Illuminate end of module assessment, this is what you'll get back in return through reports. You'll have overall class percentages, percent correct for each question. You'll have the answer choices that each student put down on their paper, on their test. You'll have performance band distributions. You'll have which students mastered and did not master the assessment, question group performance, as well as the standard mastered and not mastered. So this is a snapshot of one of our math coaches, Ms. Dunlap, who helped cultivate and presented during Teacher Development Week this exact presentation. So this is the screenshot of what you will see once you log in to Illuminate through Clever. The first thing that we want to do after students have taken the assessment is go to this tab at the bottom that says View Assessments. From there, on the right-hand side, we're going to click on Reports. For the purpose of today's presentation, we will walk through a few reports, with the first being the matrix report. You would then want to make sure you have the option to group by multiple things. For the purpose of this report, we will group by question, meaning that the report will display all of the questions in numerical order. So this is a snapshot of what the assessment matrix will show. Along the top, you will see that it is identified by question number. Questions 1 through 12 are listed here for us to see. Directly underneath the question number is the percent that the class scored on that question. Further down, you will see the correct answer. And then underneath that large black line, you will see that is where it begins the student level data. So the first thing you will see is the student overall score. Then from there, you will see each student's answer for each question. The assessment matrix that I just showed does a few things. It shows which questions were the most difficult for students. It shows which questions were the least difficult. It shows which question types did the students struggle with. And it also does a student versus class performance on items, so you can see where certain students fell among the class averages, as well as to see exactly which question groups and question types the students as well as the overall class performed well and struggled with. So let's go to a few more examples. And if you've gotten to the bit.ly for this presentation, you will have access to these. We've already looked at the assessment matrix. So let's look at the assessment question group. Now, for this one, we will be using Math Interim 2 assessment from last year just as a starting point. The first thing you will see is it looks very similar to the one we just looked at. It has question number across the top, followed by percent correct. As we said before, the first thing that we would want to do is identify which questions students struggled with the most and had the most success with. So quickly, I'm able to identify that question 1 was the highest performing question with 90% of the students scoring that question correctly. Underneath that, we will see the green squares represent a correct answer of D, whereas any incorrect answer would then be followed by the letter that was guessed incorrectly. So as I'm scrolling through, I can see that student 13 selected B, student 22 omitted this question. That's why there is nothing there. And as I can see, it looks like this student omitted all the questions on the test. Student 25 answered A, student 40 answered B, and then student 46 answered A. So those are my only wrong answers. Now, in that quick look at question 1, I could tell that the distribution was either D, B, or A, meaning no one in the class selected C. And to say that there was a common mistake would be very complex since there was only a small percentage of students that missed this question, and the same numbers selected B as A. So after I've identified that question 1 is the top performing question, I also want to look at other questions maybe that has some higher performance. Question 4 with 78%, question 2 with 67, and question 10 with 67. So those are my higher performing questions. So now let's look to the other end of the spectrum where our students struggle the most. Again, looking at the overall class percent underneath the question number, I will go through and see that question 8 had 22%. The correct answer is A. So just as I did with question 1, a quick look would help me identify where the common mistakes happened at. So looking through quickly, I can see that a lot of students selected B and a lot of students selected D. Not too many selected C. So B and D were my distractors. And so I would want to make sure that I went back through the assessment to identify what B and D answer choices were to identify where students had the misconceptions. The other opportunity I think that our assessments give is in the realm of multi-select. As we know, when students enter third grade, they will all be taking the LEAP test, and the LEAP test has multi-select questions. One of the common problems our students have is that they don't know how to answer multi-select questions because of lack of exposure. So as I can see, question 3 is a multi-select because B and D are both the answers. Now, one of the cool things about looking through the item analysis is that we can see how many students just selected one of those answers. So for instance, student 1 selected a correct answer of B, but did not also select D. And I can see that that happened for student 3, who answered D, student 4, and student 5. 4 of the first 5 students on this report had an answer correct. However, because it was a multi-select, did not answer both parts. That turns into a teachable moment where I can make sure that I'm showing students how to correctly answer a multi-select. So again, this is the assessment matrix report. These are the ideas that you can come up with just based off of this report. So let's close out of this, get back into the presentation. The other thing we want to go over is the standards-based reports that can be pulled. So we're working with the same assessment, grade 2, interim 2, and you'll see that question 1 is still at 90%. However, the look of this report is slightly different. This report is now breaking the questions into the different standards. So on the grade 2 math interim 2 assessment, I can see that these were the standards assessed: 2 NBT1, 2 NBT2, 2 NBT4, 2 NBT5, and 2 OA1. Underneath that, it will show the questions that aligned with that standard. So the first standard was 2 NBT1, and question 11 was the only question that associated with that standard. So that is how we see question 11 had 45% correct, which then also equates to the overall percentage of the standard at also 45. NBT2 had a combination of one of our higher performing questions, question 1, and one of our lower performing questions, question 9. On question 1, students had 90% accuracy. On question 9, 35%. But the one thing I would also like to draw attention to is the discrepancy between a singular answered multiple choice problem, with question 1 was, where question and answer D was the correct answer, and question 9 was a multi-select, where there was 3 answers, A, D, and F. Remember, students have to get all 3 answers correct to generate points. So even though student 1 had A, which is a component of the correct answer, did not follow it with D and F. So as you can see, that is grayed out, meaning that the student got it wrong. So they got question 1 right, question 9 wrong. So for the standard, the student is scoring 50%. And then the far right-hand side, you would see the class percent for standard 2 NBT2. So let's click over to 2OA1, which was our most assessed standard. It had 5 questions, and students scored 49% on those 5. This would be a great opportunity now to pull small group instruction to focus on 2OA1 and identify students that scored below a particular number that you would like to address. So one way to address this standard would be to identify all the students that may be scored in the unsatisfactory range, let's say 0 to 20% on this standard, and that could be a small group. By having this information, you could also group together students by a question. So as we said earlier, when we're identifying questions that have a low percentage, one of the things to look for is the distractors and common misconceptions. A small group could be pulled by using question 12 and identifying students that selected answer choice B. More than likely, those students are doing the same misstep in their equation. So by pulling your small group in that realm, you would be tackling a specific problem, or by addressing the standard-based problem by looking at their overall percent correct for that standard. So let's go ahead and click out of this and get back to the presentation. So again, these are just a few opportunities that you would have, and these are just a few examples of reports. There are many more reports that Illuminate has to offer. So you have the data, now what? Well, the next steps, as we discussed with looking at the data, reteaching is always the best next step. Making sure that you've identified where students struggle with would help you reteach and identify where you need to go next. The other thing is, how does this affect pacing? That's why we discussed small group instruction as maybe being the best route to go for those reteaching opportunities. The other opportunities that you have is to provide students with exposure to Dreambox and to Zern. Well, thanks for taking the time to walk through a brief overview of how to use Illuminate end of module data. I hope this video provides clarity around the work we do with our students, teachers, and administrators. If you need anything from the math department, please do not hesitate to reach out to anyone on this list. Myself, Justin Robichaux, our elementary content trainer, LaTrenda Knighton, our middle school content trainer, Ms. Debbie Roberts, and our high school content trainer, Ms. Ashlyn Cage. As always, thanks for everything you do to make EBR a great place to learn and work. Have a great day.